of you so much. I am so sad that we can't be together as we read this book. I know that it is a little bit flowery and that sort of stuff, but I promise we can get through this together. No birds today, but I do have a neighbor mowing his lawn, so, you know, it's Corona time, so what are you gonna do about that? Okay, so for this time, this portion that you're going to be reading, it starts on page 21, and then you guys are going to go until about a little bit past the halfway point on page 45. So there's a lot that happens in this section. So we're kind of looking down at the bottom of page 21, and we get to the Mechanical Hound. So the Mechanical Hound is sort of like this weird machine creature that's kind of like a dog, but it has 8 legs, so it's kind of like a spider dog. And if you read in here, you'll kind of see that what is this Mechanical Hound's job? It's to basically kill pests. So it's been programmed to go out and kill they said rats and stray cats and chickens and weird stuff like that, and then throw them in the incinerator. And then as we're kind of looking down here, we see that it's kind of like a game with the firemen, that they will like put a stray rat down there and then watch as the Mechanical Hound goes to kill this poor creature. So the hound is a little bit of a scary creature, and as we kind of go into page 23, we're going to kind of see that Montag is going up to the hound, and the hound is acting really hostile to him, which is weird because Montag obviously isn't a rat, so why does he act, or why does it act kind of weird? And he's talking to this guy, the captain. And as you kind of get into page 25, the captain and Beatty are synonymous. So the captain is basically like Montag's or Guy's boss, basically. And he claims that Guy Montag claims the Mechanical Hound doesn't like him. And the captain's like, whatever, not really a thing. And he's like, no, no, no. What if they took all of my DNA, they put it into the hound and said, hey, what if we kill this guy, or what if we attack or act unfriendly towards this guy, versus just rats. And this is kind of what Guy Montag presents to the captain. The captain kind of blows him off. He's like, nah. As we go into page 25, it's just kind of talking about this interesting line right smack dab here in the middle. It says, he's talking about the machine, and he says, it's sad, said Montag quietly, because all we put into it is hunting and finding and killing. It's a shame if that's all it can ever know. Beatty snorted gently. Hell, it's a bit of a fine craftsmanship, a good rifle that can fetch its own target and guarantees the bullseye every time. That's why, said Montag, I wouldn't want to be its next victim. Why? You got a guilty conscience or something? Montag glanced up swiftly. So, Montag, why is he acting guilty? Shady. So, going on, we are seeing the friendship development through page 25, through 26, between Clarice and Guy Montag. And so, I know the relationship seems very weird in 2020 light of this 30-something-year-old man talking to this high school girl. It seems weird, but as we see on the top of page 26, he kind of treats it more as like a father-daughter type of a relationship. And then she sort of talks about schooling, and then I really do want you to read all of this, so that's why I'm briefly skimming over it. But basically, she's talking about school. And what I want you to do, the question that I want you to answer in the Google form that I'm going to attach as a video check is, what does she talk about on page 27 that relates to school and teenagers today? So if you look on page 27, she's talking all about how basically school just tells them what they think that you need to know, not necessarily letting it figure letting school and education and adults figure it out for yourself and ask questions. They just kind of want to spit out answers at you, and then you just spit them right back, like memorization. And this is really like modern day life. If we go down to the bottom of page 27, he's talking, or she's talking about how she's afraid because teenagers are starting to kill each other, which, you know, obviously we don't really see that as much in Bradenton, Florida, especially during this coronavirus. But we do see that a lot of times with the teenage death rates of drunk driving, inner city gang related types of deaths for people who are younger, which is not necessarily something that we had before technology. So that's what she's talking about. She's talking about how why don't people actually sit down and talk? I know that nowadays we have literally nothing else to do but talk to the people sitting around you or talk to people online, but think back before Corona, why didn't people ever just sit down and actually talk about what was actually happening? They just kind of don't really do anything. Okay, so top of page 29. I want you to look at this part where it says, Montag, a funny thing. Heard this morning firemen in Seattle purposely set a mechanical hound to his own chemical complex and set it loose. What kind of a suicide would you call that? So we kind of saw that Bradbury was foreshadowing in the earlier scene when he was talking about the mechanical hound and how the mechanical hound was out to get him and how it was this other fireman who committed suicide using the hound. And this also might be foreshadowing something that else is happening. Okay. We move down through 29. We see that Clarice is gone. What the heck? Clarice. She was just hanging outside every single day for a week, and now all of a sudden, boom, she's gone. What's going on? All right, we are going through to where Montag and Beatty, remember Beatty's the captain, Guy Montag are talking, and Guy is kind of starting to think like Clarice now. He's starting to think a little bit differently, and he's kind of starting to realize the world around him. He's never actually paused to think about what was actually happening. And so, and this super long paragraph at the bottom of page 30, he's talking about how he realizes that, oh my gosh, all of firemen look alike. Is that sort of the job description here? And then as we go into page 31 and into page 32, we figure out that what is going on in this society. He kind of is asking the question, didn't firefighters like used to put out fires? And Beatty says, no, no, no. It's always been like this, all the way back to Ben Franklin, who was the first fireman. And he told all of us that we should be burning books as a way to burn all the books with English influence on them. Which, if you know anything about world history or US history, you know that Ben Franklin did create the first firehouse, but it wasn't to burn books, it was to put out fires. So that's incorrect, but this is what the government is telling people to believe. They're telling people to believe that the firemen were created to burn books. Okay, so we are going into the next scene that goes through page 32, 33, 34, 35, and it's talking about this woman. And this is unlike a scene that has ever happened for Guy Montag before. Guy Montag, when he usually gets there, the police have gone in first and adhesive taped the victim's mouth and bandaged him off into their glittering beetle cars so that when you arrive, you come to an empty house. You weren't hurting anyone, you were just hurting things. And since things couldn't really hurt, since things felt nothing and things don't scream or whimper as this woman might begin to scream or cry out, there's nothing to tease your conscience later. You were simply cleaning up. Janitorial work, essentially. Everything to its proper place. Quick! With the kerosene, which is basically like gasoline. Who's got the match? So he's basically saying that this is the first time that he's ever shown up on a scene and the person who originally owned these books is there. So he kind of starts to connect, oh my gosh, there's people behind these libraries and these books that he's never actually really thought about before. And he is going, if you go to the top of page 35, that is an important paragraph right here because it's a huge development. So he is holding this book and he's looking at it. He's like, oh, and his hand had done it all with a mind of its own, its conscience and a curiosity, and each trembling finger had turned thief. Now it plunged the book back under his arm, pressed it tight to his sweating armpit, and rushed out empty with a magician's flourish. Look here, innocent, look. So he's taken this book that he has found in this library that belongs to this woman, and he's hidden it underneath his arm, and he takes it home. So he's already creating this huge problem because, right, nobody is supposed to have books. You get arrested if you have books. So he found this book and something compels him to hide the book underneath his arm and take it home. So he's going in and they are trying to clear this woman out because they're saying, like, you have to get out of the house, we're gonna burn it down, basically full of your books. And what's crazy is this woman says, no, I'm gonna stay here and I'm gonna stay with my books. So like, are you crazy? We're literally burning down your house. You have to get out. And Beatty kind of seems to understand this. He's kind of like, they're suicidal, they're crazy. Guy Montag is like starting to think maybe they're not so crazy. And what's actually super crazy, and I don't know if you caught this, but on page 36 and 37, she lights the match. She lights the match that causes the whole house to burn down and her to die inside of it, alive. So she burns alive with her books, which if you're thinking in the mindset of Guy Montag at this point, what's going through his mind? He's seeing this woman burning alive in front of him. What's so special about books that you would be willing to die for them? If you think about it today, a person burns the book, so what, whatever. If you were to burn the Quran in front of a Muslim, they would treat that as a super big deal. If you burned the Bible in front of a Christian, would we think that to be as big of a deal? So books are just paper, that's true, but the words inside of them, they're super impactful to human history. I know that we have electronic words today, but words have meaning. And this is something that Guy Montag is sort of realizing, is that there's something bigger, there's something maybe a little bit sinister about what he's always sort of accepted as his life. And he's coming home, he's through 37 into 38. He is talking about this thing that she said as they were walking in. A man named Latimer said to a man named Nicholas Ridley as they were being burnt alive at Oxford for heresy. So what's interesting is Beatty, the captain, knows this quote. This woman said this quote. That was the same quote as somebody who was burned alive for heresy. And heresy is sort of like speaking out against God. So this is what, it's interesting that Beatty knows this quote, even though he's not supposed to know how to read or have read any books in the past. So seems interesting. Beatty has something else going on. All right, so we're going into 38. 38 is talking about, this is a confusing part from 38 kind of until the end. And I know that's really confusing, so let's break it down. So, Guy comes home and Mildred is laying in the bed and he is super out of whack. He just saw this woman burn alive. And so he lays down in the bed and he puts the book that he had stolen from her house and puts it underneath his pillow. And they were separated beds, and so Mildred kind of senses that something's not right with Guy, so she comes over to him and he's kind of crying and freaking out in his bed. Later on, he is laying in his bed and his bed is like right next to his wife's, but they're not in the same bed. And he's kind of realizing, like, I don't remember when I met you. And he asks her and she doesn't remember either, which is super weird. I mean, you all know couples nowadays who celebrate like, wow, it was like our second snack that we shared together. Wow, we gotta get a present to celebrate this anniversary. Definitely not happening with this couple. And he's sort of realizing that, like, if we go into page 41, he's scared for Mildred. He has to count now how many pills that she has swallowed because he's worried that she's gonna have another overdose. And what's crazy is at the bottom, or the top, this top paragraph on page 41, this last couple sentences. And he remembered thinking that if she died, he was certain that he wouldn't cry, that if his wife died, he wouldn't even care. For it would be like the dying of an unknown, a street face, a newspaper image, and it was suddenly so very wrong that he had begun to cry, not at the death, but at the thought of not crying at death. A silly, empty man near a silly, empty woman, while the hungry snake still made her more empty. Wow. So he's realizing that I don't even know this person who I'm married to. There's not just a wall between us emotionally. This wall is physical, and it's the TV screen. So whenever we see Mildred, or his nickname for her is Millie, she's kind of synonymous with this TV. And whenever it talks about wall screening, it's talking about these TVs that are like the entire size of the whole wall. They're these massive TVs. And all throughout 41 and into 42 and 43, what it's talking about is it's talking about these people who are on these TV screens that Millie or Mildred is watching. So when it's talking about all this dialogue and he's talking about this like crazy crash of music and thunder, that's the TV screen that's like yelling at him and so loud and so obnoxious. And he even asks Mildred, like, who are these people? Like, what are they even fighting about? Like, what's even going on in the show? And she's so like out of it that she's like, I don't know. So what's wrong with Mildred in this book? She is so ditzy and so out of it. She has no clue what's going on, cannot remember anything. Why do you think that Mildred got to be this way? Do you think that she's always been this way? It just seems like Guy Montag and her are so different. And I think that's sort of what Guy Montag is realizing too, that he's sort of becoming his own and to this own person, and he's realizing what's really out there in the world. And here's Mildred, who's so just out of it. She just watches TV all day long and has her like basically AirPods plugged in, listening to people talk all day long. It kind of goes into 43 where it's sort of like a dream where she's driving the car super fast and he's trying to communicate to her and she just isn't listening to him because she's so focused on the TV. Okay, so 44 into 45, boom, pow, this is the earth shaker right at the very end. So this is where Clarice comes up again. So Guy Montag says to his wife Mildred, hey, like whatever happened to that girl next door, that high school girl named Clarice? And this is where we get the news from Mildred, very casually, that Clarice is dead, that she got ran over by a car, and that her whole family is just gone. So this is a big news, obviously, for Guy Montag. He was really good friends with this girl. They had like a father-daughter type of relationship, and now all of a sudden she's just gone, and Mildred couldn't even be bothered to remember to tell him. So obviously this is going to be a huge turning point in the book. There's going to be even more that's going to be happening throughout the end of part 1, which you will read next week. So yes, that is the next part that you're going to be reading in Fahrenheit 451. So, was it a conspiracy theory to kill Clarice? Did it happen by accident? We don't really know. Maybe we'll find out. I just want to reiterate again that you guys can keep it up. I will kind of try to keep it as consistent as possible with reading the book and then doing one task with your research paper. Again, I miss you guys so much. I really wish that we could be together and to kind of dissect this together. But I will do my best. Please, like, leave me comments, message me, any sort of questions that you have. I'm really fast at getting back to you. So, Read the book, answer the questions, and work on your research paper. I will see you guys next week.